Alright, so let's talk about the essential camera features that you should be considering in 2025 for high-end product photography. And in my case, I'll be sharing all the features that I use on this Nikon Z9 and how exactly I'm taking advantage of this camera when it comes to shooting high-end product visuals for advertising, right? Now, before we actually dive into the feature list, I just wanted to share this one thing with you guys as back in the day in 2010, when I started out in commercial photography, I used to think that there are only two kind of cameras. One is the crop censored and another one is the full frame camera. And I used to think that if I buy a full frame camera, I would be considered as a professional, right? So again, getting back to the same time, the first camera that I bought was the crop sensor DX camera from Nikon only. It was a Nikon D90, and using that camera, I created my first portfolio. Right. So I shot these photos of the beverages, alcoholic beverages, and once my portfolio was ready, I went to meet various agencies and brands. And at this one instance, I had a meeting at Ogilvy in Gurgaon, and I was meeting an NCD, a National Creative Director, who was handling brands like Diageo, Pernod Ricard, and doing all the big shoots. So I went to meet him, and I showed him my portfolio. He looked at my body of work. He said, I really like your work. And the first question he asked me was, what format do you shoot on? And I had absolutely no idea about what a format meant, at that point of time, because all I knew that there were there was Nikon camera and Canon cameras, and these are the best that you can have. So I told him that I don't know about the format, but I'm using Nikon cameras, and I'm very happy with the result, and very happy with the kind of photos that I can create with these cameras. But later I realized what exactly he was trying to gauge was at what level I was shooting at. Because when you go for these big ad campaigns, these big advertising shoots, there are certain things that are the industry standard, right? Like when you go to these sets, the lighting has to be from Broncolor. The cameras have to be the medium format cameras from Hasselblad or Phase One, or when it comes to videos, it has to be Red and Phantom and things like that, right? So there are certain industry standard things. And in my mind, I used to think that if I can get a full frame camera at that point of time, then I would be considered as a professional. And I was so wrong, right? Because even when it comes to the image quality, there is almost absolutely no difference between the photos being shot on a crop censored camera and a full frame camera, and for that matter of fact, even on a medium format camera. Like, what I mean is that if I show you a particular photo, just by looking at the photo, nobody can tell that whether a crop censored or a full frame or a medium format camera was used to create this photo, right? And in terms of quality, again, you cannot make out any difference unless you just zoom in and pixel peep, and then maybe you can tell the difference between a medium format and a full frame camera, but otherwise, by and large, it doesn't matter, right? So, but I very quickly realized that although there is not much difference between full frame crop sensor or medium format camera, but if you want to build an image, an impression on folks from the agency and the client, then you need to have some industry standard in your photography set. But again, after being shot, after all these years and having shot all these campaigns, now, right now, all of these things really doesn't matter to me. All I want to do is to get the job done using the camera that is most suited for that particular shoot, right? I don't care about what the client or the folks from the agency would think about the kind of camera brand that I'm using, because I know that as a photographer, even the cameras from Nikon, Sony, Canon, the flagship cameras are much better than the medium format cameras from Hasselblad and Phase One when it comes to the list of features that are packed into these camera bodies. So I just want to tell you guys that don't fall into this trap of buying the most expensive camera to impress the client. Because even if you buy the flagship cameras like this Z9, which is a very expensive camera from Nikon, or similar cameras from Canon, Sony, Fujifilm, it will make no difference to them, because if it is not a Hasselblad or a phase one, the rest are all the same, right? So keep this in mind. And the other thing that I want to tell you is that, even depending on the kind of job that you're doing, depending on the brief, if you need to use a specialized camera, like like I mentioned, the phase one, the Hasselblad, Red or Phantom, things like that, you not even need to be technically good with this equipment, right? As a photographer, your most important thing is to have a vision, right? A vision to accomplish the brief in the style that you shoot in, right? It doesn't matter whether you technically know everything about this specialized equipment or not, because on these bigger shoots you can always have assistance and help in terms of a digitech, assistants and gaffers to do the lighting, to connect the camera for tethering, to solve all the technical details, technical problems that you might have on the set, right? So you can have all this support, but the most important thing as a photographer is to have a vision. You are an artist first and then a technician, right? Now, having said that, let's move on to the list of features that I'm really excited about in Z9, and the features that you should be considering if buying a camera in 2025, right? So, the first feature, of course, is the photo quality and the video quality, right? Now, when it comes to photo quality, I can say that there is not much difference in the past couple of years. All the cameras that have come, the photo quality has been good for years now, right? But what has really changed is the video quality. Now, in fact, let's have a look at have a look at some of the images from a recent project that I did to show you the kind of photo quality and video quality I can get on Z9. So, like, this particular photo was shot on Z9. I'm really happy with the kind of details I can have, because this camera is 45 megapixel, which I think is a very nice sweet spot in getting good quality images, and at the same time having other features packed together. And I'll tell you about those features in just a moment. But the image quality from this camera is fantastic. 45 megapixel is more than good enough for me for any sort of a campaign, even if the photos have to go on billboards, big banners, backlit displays. I'm very comfortable shooting with 45 megapixels. Absolutely fantastic result. And in fact, you can also have a look at these photos on my Instagram, and you can also see the behind the scenes from the same shoot. So I'm using the Z9, as I mentioned, for this particular shot. And let's have a look at another photo from the same shoot. Again, the entire shoot was done on Z9, and I'm very happy with the photo quality, the details, the dynamic range, and all sorts of things, right? The interesting part is that in all these shoots, I'm using continuous lights, and that is where the game changes, and you can really make use of the features from cameras like Z9 and the newer, mirrorless cameras. So, uh, when it comes to video, the important thing that really matters for me is the frames per second, or the FPS that your camera can reach. So what I really like about this camera is 4K, 120 FPS, NRAW in N-Log shot internally on the memory card, right? This is a fantastic feature where I can get really nice quality video shot at 120 FPS recorded internally in RAW, right? So using this feature, I can create really nice detailed close-up product shots and slow motion videos. In fact, let's look at another example from one of the shoots where I use Z9. Like, if you look at this particular video, it was shot on Z9. I was really happy with the details that I can get in the video and the kind of motion that I wanted to create. And 120p is again a very nice FPS for getting slow motion detailed video. But if your camera can have FPS like 240 or even higher, the better it is. So the higher the FPS, the better it is for shooting really nice detailed close-up of these products. You can get really nice crisp result and really nice slow motion videos using these high frames per second, right? Now, coming on to the second feature, which is focus stacking or focus shift shooting when it comes to Nikon cameras. Now, again, focus stacking is very important for high-end product photography, and let me give you another example of where it can be useful. So I shot another project. Let's take a look at this photo. So in this particular project, the goal was to create images that are tack sharp through and through. Like if you look at this photo, right from the refraction to the crown of the perfume, everything had to be in tack sharp focus, right? And this is possible only when you're using focus stacking, right? Like even if you're using a tilt shift lens, you won't be able to get this result in a single shot. So when it comes to focus stacking, there are multiple ways of doing it. In fact, let's have a look at the BTS, and there it is. I'm using the Z9 for this particular shoot. So for focus stacking, there are two possible ways. One is that you use a macro rail where you will be, pushing it millimeter by millimeter and getting these shots, the stack of images. Or the second way right now, which is built a feature built into this camera, and in fact, I think all the newer Z series cameras, where you can automatically get a stack of images. So you will set the camera up and you will press the shutter button, and the camera will automatically shift focus bit by bit, and it will create a stack of images, which you can later combine together in post using softwares like Helicon Focus or Photoshop to get a beautiful result. And another advantage of using the Z9 and the newer Z series cameras is that while using this focused stacking feature which is inbuilt into the camera, you can still have the entire stack shown on capture one while tethering, which was not the case with the previous cameras like the D850. In D850 there was also this similar feature, but when you shot this stack, it won't appear on capture one while the camera was tethered. So you wouldn't be able to see whether the photos were correctly exposed, the lighting was good, the focus was nice and well. So in this case, this feature works really well, and I use it all the time when I need to get photos tack sharp from end to end, right? The next feature that I'm really excited about using is the high shutter speed, right? And you can also call it high speed photography. And by that, what I mean is, in fact, let's have a look at some of the high speed photography that I used to do before the Z9. So this particular shot was created using the Nikon D850, and in this case I'm using flashlights with high flash frequency instead of continuous light, right? So when you're using flashlight, you don't need to use high shutter speed because you're freezing action or liquids by using the high frequency flashes and not the shutter speed, right? So in this case, the flashlight is perfectly fine. But right now, using the Z9, I can use continuous lights to freeze action, which is absolutely incredible because I'm using continuous lights to do so many things like AI production, and I'm creating photos using continuous lights. We can also shoot videos in the same set to save time. So when you are using continuous light, you are still being able to freeze action using the high shutter speed available on the Z9, which is, in fact, the shutter speeds on this particular camera model can go up to 1 by 32 thousandth of a second, which is absolutely incredible and mind boggling, right? So let's have a look at the example so it'll be more clear as to what I'm saying right here. So if you look at this particular shot, before Z9, it was not possible to get a photo like this with continuous lights. You have to use flashlight, and that too with high flash frequency to get results like this. But with continuous lights, I can still freeze action. Like you can see here how exactly I've frozen the details when it comes to the bubbles, right? And in this particular shoot, again, as you can see, I'm using continuous lights. And here you can see how exactly I'm creating this, the waves in the shot, how exactly I'm creating this motion and freezing it using continuous light only because the shutter speed on the Z9 can be pushed all the way up to 1 by 32 thousandth of a second, right? So it makes my job really, really easy. Because of this particular feature, I can shoot both photos and videos in the same set using continuous light. A really, one of the biggest game changers for me to save time and make the shoot more efficient, right? Now, the next feature that I'm excited about is the high ISO capabilities of the Z9, because again, I mean, this camera is primarily designed for high speed, high action photography like sports, wildlife, and things like that. So I also take advantage of this high ISO capability in my product shoots. Like again, going back to the same example, if you look at another photo from the same shoot, this was also shot on Z9 at a very high shutter speed and high ISO, right? Because in the set, if you look at the behind the scenes, the kind of lighting I'm using is not very powerful, right? For some reason, we decided to use lights not more than 300 and 500 power, and even while using that kind of lighting setup, I was still able to freeze action using high shutter speed and high ISO performance of the Z9. Because even I mean, just to give you another example, earlier when I was using cameras like D850 or D800, I would never push the ISO beyond the base ISO, which was 64, to get the best quality of images. But on cameras like this, on Z9 and cameras which are capable of high ISO performance, you can very easily push the ISO to, like I have used ISOs like 2000, 4000, 5000, and still be able to get results that are good enough for high-end commercial product shoots, right? So the kind of flexibility that you can have when you have these features is almost absolutely non-negotiable when it comes to saving time, making the shoots more efficient, and creating both photos and videos at the same time, right? The next feature that I'm really that I'm using a lot these days is the high continuous shooting speed, right? And what I mean by that is that this camera can shoot up to 20 frames per second in full resolution raw, right? And this again is a very very big advantage, especially when you're shooting high speed action, or you're trying to freeze splashes and things like that, trying to create animations. Let me just give you another example from the same shoot. So if you look at this particular shot, here this animation is created from a burst of images shot at 20 frames per second full resolution raw, right? And this is possible only because of this particular feature. Otherwise I would be shooting images manually, or let's say if I was shooting at a lower speed of, let's say, 10 frames per second or 5 frames per second, I won't be getting the similar result, right? And we also shot some still photos where we wanted to get a very specific shape in the waves, right? So to capture the wave in at that particular moment, it is very difficult if you don't have this burst feature, right? You have to take hundreds of shots, and maybe by chance you would get that particular moment. But since you have this burst feature available in your camera, you can just take a series of photos, and you will almost every single time get the photo that you want, right? So this feature I'm using a lot these days, which I never thought I would in product photography, but just because the camera has these features, I'm just getting very very trying to get some innovative ways of shooting products, right? The next part that I'm really really happy about is the software that Nikon is creating for these cameras, like the NX Tether. And the good part about that is that when I'm connecting this camera with Capture One for tethering, the live view that you get in Capture One is not as incredible, is not as detailed, right? And you can't expand that live view on a separate monitor on a full screen. So using NX Tether, I can have a really fantastic live view which I can put onto a separate monitor, and at the same time I can connect Capture One with NX Tether so that the photos that I'm shooting will open up in Capture One directly, and at the same time I can have a really beautiful live view on a separate monitor using NX Tether. So the software support is also really good. Right, so these are pretty much all the features that I consider to be essential in a camera in 2025 for product photography, especially if you're diving into AI production with continuous lights, right? Now, if you have any questions or any doubts, concerns, do let me know in the comments, and also let me know what more would you like to see in the upcoming videos, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Cheers.